Hey everybody, Andy from Tennis Euphoria, returning after a planned break to some reviews, and I thought I'd start with a new frame on the market, the Nordicdots Model 99. It comes in grey gloss and black gloss, and I played with both. I'm actually going to keep both, which is a good sign, and helpfully mine differed in specs. The black was a 315 strung swing weight, the grey was a bit heavier and is a 330 strung swing weight. Same strings. Interestingly, they come with the factory tested specs on the box, but I was getting slightly different results on my Head 3-in-1 when I was spec testing them. But I don't want to start with a criticism because, generally speaking, it has a sort of quality feel to both the frame and the packaging. You get a stencil with each racket, which is a nice touch. So let's talk a bit about specs. When you've hit and reviewed loads of rackets, as I have, you come to realize that a frame that is isometric in head shape, 99 square inches head size, 16 by 20 string pattern, and a 23mm beam is really well thought out for the modern game. And I think it's interesting that Nordicdots are coming to market with one racket, one spec at the moment. This will appeal to a lot of people. The standout feature is that string pattern. It's denser at the top and it's more spaced out at the bottom. Now, I have a couple of theories about what their thinking is with regards to that, but it's certainly something new and interesting. In demoing with people, people are looking at me and saying, "Oh, you're hitting with a blacked out Yonex." I think it's important not to compare this frame to Yonex frames. It's not as powerful as E-zones, not as spin friendly as V-cores. I would compare it and categorize it with these sort of frames, your 100 square inch control orientated frames. And as you may know, categorization is important for me here at Tennis Euphoria. I've devised a process that matches people to their best racket category and then helps them pick their best frame within that. Let's talk a bit more about the string pattern on this one. So the idea, as I believe it, is that you connect with the ball in the modern game towards the top of the frame. Now that isometric head shape gives you a good sweet spot at the top, but also the denser part of the string pattern then gives you more control where you're connecting. Now for me, as you can see in those clips, my forehand, that's very, very relevant. I do tend to connect towards the middle upper of the frame. On my backhand side, I actually connect towards the center, sometimes low center. And that's another thing that we do at Tennis Euphoria, some video analysis on where people are connecting with the ball. Now that actually meant that in this Nordicdots instance, the frame worked quite well for me. On my backhand side, it's a slightly flatter shot. I appreciate a bit of lift over the net, and I felt that that was helping me with sort of free depth to have that slightly more open space pattern at my connection point. On my forehand side, which despite a rather old-fashioned grip, does have more wrist lag, more spin and more whip. Connecting at the top with that denser pattern was great. It did mean that I could deliver a consistent ball and sort of bed into points reliably and playing consistently. I did struggle with hitting slices with the Nordicdots. I think that's possibly because of that string pattern and inconsistent connection points. I think that's something that I would dial in. And the frame is fast through the air and I think has potential. But it's worth noting that I did really struggle to hit a consistent slice with this frame. Something that trying to demonstrate here is that it does play quite well on defense. I mean, you can just lift the ball, brush up, and get some good depth on defensive shots. And it's fast through the air and stable, which means that I was finding that it has a nice blend of being able to play aggressively, but also when you're on defense, it will pick things up really well. It's remarkably stable for its weight. Granted, my grey that I was leaning towards has a higher swing weight, but with volleys, it's very, very stable. If you ask someone to whack the ball at the net, replicate some doubles, you just got to get something on it, and you get good energy return, and it's stable with a high twist weight in your hand, and also comfortable. You don't get any good sort of horrible vibrations going back through your arm. Moving on to point play, I did have a relatively long bedding in period with the frame. I think just sort of adjusting a little bit to that string pattern. But once I did, was able to play, consistently. When you're moving well, you're feeling good, and your footwork's on. The racket really rewards aggressive, advanced play, trying to demonstrate in this clip that on occasion I would suffer with a little bit of inconsistency in launch angle. Now, that there was obviously terrible footwork, but through the rest of the point, hopefully you can see that on occasion, when pushed, I was finding a slightly inconsistent response on my backhand side. Now, of course, my technique, isn't perfect, and of course, everyone can move their feet better, which is a factor. But generally speaking, I can shield pretty well on my backhand cross court, and I was having to work hard to do that with this frame. Granted, much more with the black, the extra swing weight on the grey was meaning that I was getting a better response. Again, defensive pickup shots. You have great feel on the frame. So let's talk a little bit more about feel, as I've just mentioned it. It's a reported 65 RA, and of course when it's strung it would be a little bit lower than that, and that's very much in line with what I would sort of guess from blind testing. 62 RA would be my guess. It feels a little bit like the previous speed did, of the last iteration, the first Orsetic. I also get sort of elements of the Percept 100 from this frame, which is a frame that I rate and enjoy. But you also get a splash of that sort of simple brilliance that you get from high quality graphite frames that are quite simple but quality driven in their layup. I'm thinking, your Wilson Ultra Pros. It feels a little bit like that, sort of relatively soft, nice dwell time, plush, but crucially, it doesn't lack power, and I think that 23mm beam is, obviously delivering that. One thing that I would say, I think the racket really rewards aggressive play. I would suggest that it is more suited to advanced level players. If you're intermediate, you could get on with it, and maybe develop with it, but it's the sort of frame that rewards aggressive and advanced play, full strokes, and people who are connecting with the ball, of course, towards the top of the frame. It's very, very accurate on serve, and it is awesome for all court play. Just trying to demonstrate a bit of variety in that point. You get great touch and feel around the net, and you can hit your spots on serving. I perhaps lacked a little bit of power compared to some other frames. Strings, I wanted to string this with what I was using in my racket of choice. So we've got Head Links Tour in the mains, Technofiber Razor Soft in the crosses. So I'd highly recommend it, probably for advanced players. It plays better at that 330 swing weight, in my opinion, and it will go into our categorizing services here. Hope that's helpful. See you in the next one.